Oh, goody, goody, here it comes.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Oh, my God, don't stop now!
With your hosts, Ryan, John, and Elaine.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, joined by my fellow co-hosts and filmmakers, John and Elaine Woolscroft.
Monsters are real. Ghosts are real, too. They live inside us, and sometimes they win.
That was deep, dude. I liked it.
That was some deep shit right there.
I enjoyed it. Excellent.
Yeah, well, I wrote it.
So excellent.
It's not a quote from Stephen King.
That's
or
not
anything.
a quote at all.
Oh, so you're a thief.
You're a thief and a liar.
Dirty thief.
Dirty thief. Yeah. So we're on episode 70, the big 7-0, and
We're elderly now.
we're elderly.
We are.
Yeah. I think we're way past like the AARP card.
Oh, yeah.
Was that come like 55?
That was 55, yeah.
Something like that. Maybe I'm just getting old, but those ads are kind of interesting because I'm like, oh, yeah, like you can look towards retirement. You can take classes again. I'm like, oh, I'm fucking old because that actually looks fun. It's working on me. You know, Tim Gunn's in those ads.
That's how they get you.
Love that dude.
That's how they get you, you know.
It's frightening, guys. This
So you
is
like the
scary
idea of
stuff.
like a couple doing like a swing dance while the husband wears like a slacks and an Oxford button down?
You have not seen any of the recent ones because it's like all these high-powered people and like these awesome jobs, and then they're like starting up like businesses at 50. And
basically, all the yuppies from the 80s are now retiring, so that's why they're trying to appeal to them.
I mean,
That's
fucking
it.
working.
Yeah,
Even
that's
better.
it.
I'm just older than I thought, but it is frightening to me.
Well, speaking of an AARP card.
And
guys,
frightening. Speaking of frightening,
Did you know that Jamie Lee Curtis is going back to the Halloween franchise?
she sure is.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling us, John.
And she
Although-
looks really good.
She does look really good for probably being close to 60.
Yeah. No, she's older than that.
She's
isn't
older
she?
than that, isn't she?
Is she?
I don't know.
She was very young in the original Halloween movie.
She is. It's funny because she's been around for that
I'm going to
character.
say she's 59. You both are looking it up here, audience.
All right.
There's a race.
All right.
There's a race.
Brian is on a laptop. Lane is on a cell phone.
I got it
Who
first.
will win? Okay, how
58.
So you were a year
Oh.
off, but you went over. So if we're doing Price is Right rules, you lose.
Doo-doo.
But yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is going to be playing Laurie Strode again in another reboot of, the Halloween franchise. It's coming out next year.
Wait, is it a reboot or a soft sequel boot or a...
Well, I guess that depends on the plot, doesn't it? If there's like a new generation.
Well,
then...
my thing is, like, how are they gonna, like, because she was terrible in H2O. You remember that? You remember
She
Halloween?
wasn't terrible
Yeah,
in it. That
she
movie was terrible.
It was a
I like
bad
that movie a lot when I first saw it, like, because I was
Everybody
like,
liked that
14.
movie a lot.
Yeah. When it came out, and yeah.
Dude, Jamie Lee's mom was in it. It was amazing. It was magical.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like,
It had that hack from Dawson's Creek, like,
It
writing
did.
all his quippy dialogue because he wants to be Joss Whedon, you know?
Yeah, but I'm just
Kevin
saying,
Williamson?
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin, you can't really compare Kevin Williamson and Joss Whedon just because they both had shows on like the WB on at the same
they
time.
both write
Yeah.
that snarky dialogue of like
There's-
teenagers that are too smart for their own good.
Listen,
Teenagers too
I'm
smart for their own
a
good.
scholar. I'm a scholar of that oeuvre of television, and
Oeuvre.
I could discuss that at length. I'll spare you all right now, but
Thank you.
I respectfully disagree. You can't. They're not interchangeable.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know. For me, like, that Halloween H2O film kind of just
I still like that
came
movie. You
out.
guys can
But
suck it.
yeah, but it came out at, like, the time when you had Scream, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. It just seemed
Yeah,
like a
it-
cheap cash-in.
Yeah, it totally was a cheap cash in, but the way that they wrote it was kind of cool though, where like she, Laurie Strode had like moved away and changed her name. I mean, it was like the ultimate what if, like whatever happened to that character kind of wish fulfillment. She moved away and she had a kid and, I don't know, like I think it
I'm
was
just
interesting.
curious if they're going to tie in that,
I don't know. Well, who knows what's canon and what's not, because didn't Laurie die?
Well, yeah, this franchise,
she did.
is so messed up because, if Halloween Resurrection is supposed to be part of the franchise and, it's always taking liberties with that now, like, oh, these films count and these ones don't. Michael killed her
Yeah.
in the insane
She
asylum.
She did.
She did.
She did.
But, Halloween H2O kind of dismissed 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mean, 3 doesn't really count. But, this one I think they said was possibly going to just take place right after 2. So there was one that takes place after 1. Now there's one that takes place after
It's just a
2.
fuckery. It's just fuckery.
4, 5, and 6 apparently are fan fiction. Those are never brought up.
It's just... And I mean, we go on this all the time about Hollywood and how they have literally no ideas, but they literally have no ideas. Like, this is ridiculous.
I know.
I'm all in favor of Jamie Lee Curtis being in the film, but, how many reboots to Halloween are we going to have here?
Well, is this a natural progression? You drive the franchise into the ground, you reboot it until those reboots fall into the ground, and then you kind of bring the franchise back to its original place with the original cast for nostalgia.
So you mean they're doing the New Coke thing? That's exactly what New Coke was.
New Coke.
You remember New Coke?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Some people
hated
still
it,
haven't
they
forgiven it.
But I mean, that's exactly what Coca-Cola did.
What did New Coke taste like, you guys?
I don't remember.
Pepsi.
It
Did
tasted
it?
like, it was supposed to taste like Pepsi. But, yeah.
Party foul Coke.
For those of you youngins.
You youngers.
You youngers
Young
who
peeps.
don't know the history of the Coke and New Coke thing, basically in the mid-'80s, Coke had Coke Classic, and people loved it, that sort of thing.
Well, remember, it was just Coca-Cola then. The Classic wasn't a part
Yes,
of it.
it was just Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening was they thought, hey, let's go and change our recipe that we've had since, I don't know, the 20s, and change it.
They rebooted Coke.
They rebooted it and turned it into New Coke.
And do you guys know who their spokesperson was?
Who was their spokesperson?
Famed rapist Bill Cosby.
Oh, yes.
Excellent.
That's right.
Oh, the new Coke.
But the whole point is that New Coke happened and everyone hated it.
Well, yeah,
Even
they
people
liked Coke.
Well, even people that didn't drink Coca-Cola, they were offended by the idea that they would take it away, even
Exactly.
though they don't even drink the product.
Wow.
It was just
They
They were just
knowledge
like,
to them.
they were like, Coca-Cola is a American staple, and you just completely fucked it up. Similar to how the movies that we grew up with are getting fucked over, and we're tired of it. But the point is that Coca-Cola, in a brilliant marketing scheme, basically got rid of New Coke and came up with Coke Classic, which was the same damn Coke. And everyone was happy, and I think their sales went through the roof.
Oh, yeah.
The minute they brought back
Yeah.
the Coke. So the idea is, could they be doing that with Halloween? Could they be saying, hey, we're going to give you shit, and then, maybe 10 years later, give you the movie you really wanted?
Well, they're gonna do it with Nightmare on Elm Street. They
better
tried.
not.
They tried rebooting it, and how much money do you think Blumhouse is going to give Robert Englund to put the makeup on one more time?
Yeah, it's true.
Is he going to do a Blumhouse film?
There's no news, no rumors. This is just my prediction that if this Halloween movie Blumhouse makes any money off of it, we're going to see Kane Hodder as Jason again. We're going to see Robert Englund as Freddy again. Because you drive it in the ground, then you reboot it until that fails, and then you just nostalgia fuckery all the way back to the original ones.
Yeah.
But
Well, did you guys see the production team on this? I thought this was interesting.
okay.
So, obviously, Jason Blum is going to be a producer. And but did you see
terrible
that
name.
David Gordon Green and Danny McBride are doing the script?
Yeah, Danny McBride's all over the place now.
Yeah, he is. I don't know. I just don't associate McBride with horror necessarily.
Well, comedy is just one step.
It is. It's true.
So deep. But anyway, David Gordon Green's then going to be directing. But I just thought that the
Who's
production.
David Gordon Green?
I think he's worked with McBride before. Let me see here real quick.
What, they couldn't gotten Johnny Carps to come and direct this shit?
Well, he's creative consultant and executive producing.
AKA they had to pay him a certain amount of money
Yeah.
to make the
Pretty
movie.
much.
Yeah, David Gordon Green. He's worked with McBride before.
He did
directed
Pineapple Express.
Yep, he directed Pineapple Express and Your Highness.
This really seems...
Oh, he did Your Highness?
I don't want to talk about it, y'all.
Shit.
This really seems like an odd group of people to be making a horror movie.
Right? That's why I said, did you hear about the production team? Because it is very strange.
Wouldn't it be great if this is just kind of an existentialist journey into a woman who with traumatic stress disorder? Like, Michael is just burnt up at the beginning, and they're like, he's dead. And they just bury him, and the rest of the movie's just Laurie Strode dealing with the impact of her horrible night.
And here's the more logical thing. Laurie will become the new Michael Myers and start killing people.
That would be
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the type of thinking.
That
That's
would
the
be
type
amazing.
of lazy storytelling is just, let's just make Laurie the killer.
Well, the last thing I want to say about this is that Jamie Lee Curtis herself did tweet about this.
Yeah.
With the production still that they're releasing now with the news.
Yeah.
And she tweeted the photo and said, same porch, same clothes, same issues. 40 years later, headed back to Haddonfield one last time for Halloween.
Dude, and she looks good. That Activia is
really
treating
good.
her well.
She looks really good.
Okay, Perv and Perv Jr.
You know what? Jamie Lee was very important to my early teenage years.
All right, well.
I think there's a whole crop of horror fans who have the same.
All right, well, I'm going to
Same
throw
thing.
the cold bucket of water on you that is a message from our friends at the Epicast Network. And when we come back, we're talking Stephen King, y'all.
Hey guys, this is Marta from Marta on the Move. I hope you're enjoying this podcast. When you're done with this one, you should go check out mine on www.martaonthemove.com. On the Epicast Network, you can find me on Twitter at I Can't Find Marta. If you like interesting people and places in Pittsburgh, food and drink, travel advice, and general nerdery, check it out and keep it moving.
And we're back. That was a message from our friends over at the Epicast Network, specifically Marta on the Move. Marta's got an awesome event coming up.
She is on the move, isn't she?
She is on the move.
She's, in fact, on the move.
She's got an awesome event coming up in October if you are a fan of spooky stories.
And who isn't?
Who isn't? Seriously, it's like Halloween time. But her event's called True Spooky Stories of Pittsburgh, live podcast. It's going to be on October 13th at 7 p.m. at the Carnegie Coffee Company in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So if you're outside of Pittsburgh, you should drive here for that event. Mm-hmm. Check her out. You can find the event page for that on her Twitter at I Can't Find Marta. So
And there's a Facebook event.
there is a Facebook
floating
event
around,
for it
if
too.
You guys
but
need to find it there.
Just type in True Spooky Stories of Pittsburgh.
I can tell you're a native, by the way, Brian, because you said Pennsylvania. That's like a Western PA accent.
Is that seriously
thing.
true?
Yeah, that's a Western PA accent thing.
I'm
Pennsylvania?
adopted native. I'm not,
Yeah,
I wasn't born here.
That's funny. Well, you've been here long enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, my mom did like a lot of linguistics and like vocal, not therapy, but like she knows a lot about that stuff, and she was the one that like literally taught me every facet of the Western PA accent.
And Sky's gonna love it.
Also, just heads up here, I've got a bit of a chest cold, so if you hear me gagging during this whole Stephen King-a-thon, that is why.
It's not because we're into like something new and freaky. We promise.
No.
So if you like to play the drinking game of how many times will these guys
We're
cough
bringing it
on the
back.
show?
We're bringing it back.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's every episode.
we did that before.
It's not every episode.
You know what? Illness is real, okay? And I feel shamed, and you can't shame me.
No, you can't. So
So we are
Stephen King, man.
We're talking about Stephen King, and
Weird, deranged, coked out sex weirdo. Stephen King.
I mean, we're like fond of him.
he's one of those.
But there's a lot of stuff that he's done
Yeah.
that's maybe not great, like as a human being. I mean,
Yeah, he's one of those guys where you clearly can tell that there's genius in his brain, but his human side, not so much. Well,
I mean,
Would you say that he is the Big Mac and fries of modern day authors? Like, it's the best thing you can get at McDonald's, but it's still McDonald's.
yeah.
I
I
kind of
guess
see
so.
that. I mean, we'll talk about the breadth of his works for sure, but I don't know. It's hard for me to have like a full opinion because sometimes I have a hard time separating like the work and the man.
Yeah.
I
mean, that happens with a lot of...
Now with him, it's easier, I think,
artists.
just because I mean, I don't know if our listeners have too much of a idea of his, background and everything. We can do a quick bio.
Well, guys, what is today's date?
Today's the
17th.
17th of September.
17th. Okay,
Yeah.
well, in 4 days, it's Mr. King's birthday.
He's a September baby too.
Really?
Yep.
All
He'll be-
right.
So he's in good company.
He'll be turning 70 years old.
Wow, really?
Yeah. He's
So he's
been
turning
around
70 on our episode 70.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, it's funny
awesome.
because one of the things that we were talking about, the three of us before we started recording, is that I think it's so interesting to talk about Stephen King because he was famous our entire lives. Like he was
Yes.
already a huge, famous author by the time all of us were born, so that we've never known a world without King and his influences, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I believe it was the early 73 maybe when Carrie was published. But yeah, he's written over 54 novels, 200 short stories. And obviously what we're really going to be talking about today is all the film and TV adaptations of his work. So every medium has been just lacquer with Stephen King. And I kind of have a love-hate relationship with the guy. I've read a lot of his work. And obviously, I've seen almost every adaptation, film and TV of his work. And you got to take that with a grain of salt because that's from a different artist. So it might not be completely faithful to the books. But read a lot of his work. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's not. And then sometimes it's riddled with just bizarre and unnecessary, like, sexual trauma.
Yeah.
And if anybody's ever read Gerald's Game, and I really don't suggest you do, it is about a woman who...
That was adapted too, wasn't it?
I hope not. She gets talked into doing a kinky thing where she's handcuffed to the bed, and then her husband dies, has a heart attack, and he has the key, and she can't get off of the bed. And it's like, oh, this is kind of an interesting premise. But then halfway through the novel, she starts to remember how she was molested when she was like 7 years old while watching an eclipse. Wow. And it's like 70 pages.
It's in post-production.
Yeah, it is.
An adaptation of Gerald's Game.
Oh,
it is,
God, no.
It is in post-production.
And I'm just like, why do you have to go into such graphic detail of child molestation?
Yeah.
What is wrong with you, Stephen King?
He does that with a lot of things, though.
Yeah.
Not good.
Like, you look at... I mean, I get why he does it, and honestly, I'm a fan of not pulling punches when it comes to horror. I think that's the worst thing you could do is, dream up a horrible thing that you're trying to communicate, and you water it down. Yeah. I see this with a lot of, horror movies that come out nowadays.
Well, sometimes it's the light you don't turn on.
Right, but you had to go there, didn't you? But no, my point is, like, the things that you think of that are on the news are more horrifying than anything you could imagine. And that's what he pulls from. And I've noticed he does it a lot with children. And that's, I think, because he views children as innocents. And when you add a horrific element to it, it's a corruption of that innocence.
Yeah. Well, what were the four things I said last night, Elaine? You're in a Stephen King book when Maine.
It takes place in Maine, which is where he's from.
There's an alcoholic writer.
Yes.
Severe emotional and physical trauma to children. And I can't remember my last one now.
I don't know, the supernatural?
Supernatural.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
and the ending's baffling.
Oh, yeah, the ending's baffling and leaves you, like, worse off than before you started.
I am a giant spider. Okay, that's next week.
I am a giant
That's next
spider.
week. Or no, it's 2 weeks from now
2
when
weeks
we
from now.
discuss it. Excuse me.
It's true. It's true.
Don't miss our live episode, everybody.
Oh,
on
yeah.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about that one.
We will. We'll plug it. Don't
We'll
worry.
plug that at the end.
Plug that baby.
Thursday.
But yeah, so I think it's interesting because there's a very good chance that, like, we all have a very different relationship because, his works have been out. And I mean, some of the stories that John was referencing, were like 92, but I mean, the dude's been writing ever since Carrie came out,
Right.
that, and do you want to go through like his first, because Carrie was his second, right?
No, Carrie was his first
Carrie
novel.
was his
He
first
actually,
novel.
Okay. And that was in 74.
well, he actually had picked up a lot of work writing for like men's magazines, like not like Penthouse, not to that extreme, but offshoots of Playboy. That were in the same vein as Playboy,
Like GQ?
like
yeah, just
Stag.
picking up, yeah,
Not GQ itself,
yeah,
but
just freelance writing gigs. And he hadn't written a novel or anything. Has a degree in English. Like, you ever notice a lot of these people? It's like they became like famous comedians or actors, but they have degrees in like engineering. It's like,
you gotta pay the bills, bro.
Yeah.
but no, it's just strange. Like, you think they would have gone to college for this, like, but
Their parents probably were like, don't go to college for that asshole. You'll never do anything with
Yeah.
it.
But Stephen actually does have a degree in English, and was picking up freelance gigs and looked into teaching positions, but he couldn't find a high school teaching job, teaching English, and was writing Carrie. Got frustrated with it, threw it in the garbage, and his wife like pulled it out and said, "You can't just give up on this." And that was his first, novel and one of the better film adaptations of his work.
Yeah.
It's interesting because almost, I mean, it does deviate after a while, but most of his work goes in order of his novels, like the film adaptations.
Yeah.
Carrie was the first adaptation, and fairly faithful to the book from what I've read. I didn't actually read the novel, Carrie.
I only read like the first half.
Okay. But, this one is, fairly close to it. But, I mean, at the same time, you have people always have a hard time if they love a book and they see a movie adaptation. It's a different medium, and we have to respect the fact that to a certain degree there's going to be differences. You know, you don't cast Brian De Palma and ask him to do a shot-for-shot remake of the book.
No,
Right.
And honestly, I don't think you should do a shot-for-shot remake of the book.
Right, because then the art splits
Exactly.
into two different things. It's the book and the movie.
So
The only person who could do that is Clive Barker because he writes the book and then also directs the movie. So I mean,
there you go.
at that point, it's like, well, you're pretty much doing your own thing there. But
you know, and it's interesting that was the first film based on a Stephen King thing, and it was obviously the first Stephen King novel because he's written a lot of work that isn't in the horror genre, but I think that he gets labeled as the horror genre guy, kind of how like M. Night Shyamalan gets
labeled as
the horrible director. I mean, the twist guy, even though not
shitty twist guy.
not every one of his movies has a twist, but you know, you get labeled that way. So some of my favorite Stephen King work is not based on the horror themes and all that, but you know, when you start off with Carrie as a film adaptation and a book, that's kind of where you're going to get labeled. Next up was Salem's Lot, which was the first of our many Stephen King miniseries.
Oh, I love Salem's Lot.
And fairly actually decent made for TV. We're not going to be able to say that much on today's episode of a decent Stephen King miniseries. But, you know, Stephen King should be adapted in miniseries format because of the fact that the books are usually 1,000 pages long.
Right.
You can't put that into a 2-hour... Well, they've tried many times to put that into a 2-hour movie. But, you know, they made it a miniseries to be able to stretch it out and actually do justice to it. I like the miniseries quite a bit. I did read Salem's Lot, and it's pretty faithful to the book. It's a good adaptation.
We don't need to talk about the new series they did, in 2004.
I didn't even
with
realize
Rob Lowe.
this. Oh, yeah. I in my research, I saw that exists.
You don't need to see that. I saw that. But you don't need to see that.
But then we get to really the one that Stephen King just gets his panties all in a twist, which I'm pretty sure he does wear panties and then writes 100 pages about it, was the
Nasty.
Was the adaptation of The Shining, which he just...
I'm sorry, he can go fuck himself on that one. I love the Jack Nicholson Shining.
Well, to a degree,
sorry.
I get it. I mean, he's wrong because the movie is awesome.
Well, no, I think that Stephen King in particular has one really good point.
Okay.
Because,
Lynn, what did you
find? He didn't think that, Nicholson was maybe the right choice. So...
Because he's crazy off the bat?
Yeah, exactly. Because, the Jack Torrance is little by little going crazy. Yeah. But Jack was crazy from the first scene, and that's something that he didn't like. And it's funny because Stephen King himself, there's a quote here that says, "The book is hot and the movie is cold. The book ends in fire and the movie in ice." And I thought that was interesting because that's true, because, Jack Torrance is freezing at the end. But one of the things that, I'm going to love about what Stephen King has to say is that he thinks that the movie's so misogynistic. And he says, Wendy Torrance is just presented as this sort of screaming dish rag. And I totally agree with that assessment.
I get that. And I do agree with him on that point. The other points I don't. Just because, as we've said before, film is an entirely different medium. And I've seen the Shining from, with Jack Nicholson. I've also seen the Shining with Steven Weber in it. And the Steven Weber one is the one that he loves more. And that is, quote unquote, more faithful.
So he has no taste
So
whatsoever.
I'm saying you kind of get rid of your opinion the minute you say, yeah, that one's the better one. I mean, I understand it, but I think that, Nicholson was able to bring something different to that story.
And it's interesting because, this is the only one that's ever really bothered him because King has been quoted as saying before, the movies exist. They don't bother me. They've never been a big deal. The movies are just movies. If they're great, awesome. If not, fine. But, like John said, The Shining's really the only one that's ever stuck in his craw. But I think it's funny that, the author himself...
I think also him and Kubrick fought a lot over that particular film.
I think so. And especially, too, he makes the point of the character of Wendy being so misogynistic, but that was the biggest problem that he'd had with it. And there were, and he doesn't understand the fandom that's kind of centered around the film. He just doesn't understand, why it's there. So
he needs to divorce himself a little bit from the fact that he wrote the book and just look at it as a film, because
he doesn't even think it's a good film.
Okay.
That's what he's saying.
He literally does. He doesn't understand why people love that movie as much as they do.
Yeah, he doesn't even think it's a good movie, even if it wasn't based on his own work.
Well, Stephen, I hate to throw you under the bus, but I read The Shining, and it's kind of meandering. There's just a lot of filler in there. And it's weird, like the little adaptations, because in the book, he uses a mallet. And in the made-for-TV one, he uses that mallet, and it's like, wow, now we realize why a good filmmaker like Stanley Kubrick changed it to an axe, because a mallet seems like it's a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like, he throws a lot of that stuff, like, I know in the TV version, doesn't like the ghost of Steven Weber, like, show up
Yeah,
at
and he's
the
just
end?
floating.
And he's just floating, like, he's talking to his son, like, years later, and I'm just like...
Well,
Why?
I mean, I
Why?
think that they got started off on the wrong foot, because Kubrick, like, immediately dismissed the script that King himself had written as an adaptation of the novel, and he Kubrick hired Diane Johnson to adapt the script, and so the fact that like he had the script written and Kubrick was like, no, I'm good. Like, I think that probably started the relationship off on the wrong.
But I mean, I think that you have to. If you're adapting anything, you have to let the filmmaker ultimately be the one to shape what you're given. Okay? Mm-hmm. Stephen King is not a filmmaker. He's not. Okay? He's a great writer, and he is a great storyteller, but he doesn't know the mechanics of filmmaking. That's not his language. So if you've got someone like Stanley Kubrick, who that is his language,
sure,
you have to be willing to let him interpret that story his way.
But why would you pick the material that you picked if you're Kubrick when you don't believe in the supernatural? And it's been proven that Kubrick does not believe in the supernatural. He was an atheist even.
Why would you have to believe in it to make a film about
I don't
it?
think you have to believe in it.
Because he adapted it away from it. I mean, there is very much less evidence of the supernatural, I think, in the movie than in the book.
Well, I mean, I think it's subtle, and I think that's the way you handle it. Because if you look at the TV movie version, which is all heavy-handed in the supernatural, which is King's version, it just doesn't have the subtext to it. I love in the Kubrick version that you've got all these different things and all these different meanings that are all just part of the whole visual narrative, and they all just kind of come together in this whole thing, and you're just like, I get that it's horror. I watched The Shining, and the horror of that is isolation.
Yeah.
That's the entire thing, isolation. And then it also gets into elements of, massacres of Indians, Native Americans, and things like that, all over the place. So you get a much more visual subtext from that particular film than I think you do get from the base story. And that's just because of adaptations. That's what happens.
Right.
Between The Shining and Poltergeist, if anybody even tells me within 100 miles that there's an ancient Indian burial ground, I'm fucking running.
Oh yeah, no, and that goes for cemeteries too.
Yeah.
Okay, if you're like, when I was a kid, we were looking at houses. This is when we lived in Iowa, and yes, I did at one time live in Iowa.
We almost moved to Iowa, so
don't move there.
Nope.
If there's a hell, it's there. But anyway, we were looking at houses, and I remember this one house we looked at. You could look out the window and you see a full-fledged cemetery. And I'm like, no, I've seen too many horror movies.
Yeah.
Not doing this.
We looked at a house that was like a cemetery next door. We'd be the first to know about the zombie takeover.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You'd also be on the front lines and be the first ones to be eaten.
I'm telling you. It's scary stuff.
And then, interestingly enough, to come back to our good buddy here, George Romero, we have Creepshow, which he not only worked as a writer on, but was an actor in.
He was awesome. He was awesome in that. I'm sorry. I'm one of the rare people that loves Gordy Vale.
Well, what's so weird is he's the only
Gordy
fat
Vale, you
cokehead
lunkhead.
I've ever seen.
He's the only fat cokehead I've
He's
ever
the only
seen.
fat cokehead in the world. Like, he was so fat in that movie, but he was just...
He wasn't that fat.
Well, for a coke addict, he was. I'm
just saying, like, he wasn't that overweight.
Awfully judgmental of you,
he's a
John.
tall guy, so, like, it stretches out,
Maybe.
But no, I love him in Creepshow. love him in that. He was hilarious.
And then,
oh God,
we get to sometimes things are novels and sometimes things are movies, and sometimes they don't have to be the other. Mm-hmm. And one of those things is Cujo.
Oh God,
which is a great book if it's your imagination and you're reading it like on your couch. You can't make a movie adaptation of a woman in a car with a dog barking at her for 2 fucking hours.
That pissed me off the first time I saw it.
Oh God, I've read the book, I've seen the movie. It's just, God.
I'm sorry, but yeah, you're watching the movie and you're like, oh, so is anything else going to happen? No, it's the woman and her kid in the car for 2 hours.
Yeah. And then the dog just kind of circling around the car, takes a dump, barks at her.
Takes a dump, pisses on the
tries
wheel.
to open the door like a velociraptor, like... It's just, why? Why? You don't have to. I get it. Like, Hollywood was like, okay, Carrie and the Shining made a lot of money. We want to option everything he writes.
That's right.
So we don't care what it is, even if it's a evil car.
It was before
or
Christine,
evil
right?
Dog. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you make this, which is so clearly not meant for film. This is not meant for a visual medium.
You know what? That would be a good short.
Yeah.
Cujo would be a really
minutes,
yeah.
maybe.
Oh yeah, not even 20 minutes. Yeah. I think you can make Cujo into a really good 15 to 10 minute short film. Because as I said, all it is this girl, the woman and her son in a car for 2 hours. Yeah. But imagine if she had a cell phone.
Yeah. That would have fixed everything.
That would have fixed everything.
Honey, can you come and get handhold control?
Kill this dog.
But then we get back on track with one of my favorite Stephen King books and films, The Dead Zone.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
And not just because they cast Christopher Walken. About a man who suffers severe trauma and then can see into the future. Oh, that was my fourth one. If you have some kind of level of telekinesis.
Yes. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is...
Because Halloran had that in The Shining.
Yep.
The Shinnin.
Danny had it, and now we have it in The Dead Zone. I'm surprised the dog couldn't see into the future in Cujo.
Who said he can't? How dare
he was
you?
like, I know that woman's not getting out of that car, so I'm just going to keep,
Stephen King just sitting at his typewriter. Then the mom decided to have sex with Cujo to get him to go away. Cujo's penis was engorged beyond compare. It's like, hey, Stephen, you can't publish this with the dog sexing in it. Why? But, it's actually very interesting because it's about, the character in The Dead Zone finding out about a corrupt politician who may eventually in the future lead us to nuclear war. So, did anybody else get any Trump feelings?
Oh my
about
God!
this?
He knew. Here's the thing. Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, it just makes a lot of sense because, Stephen King's so politically active.
Yeah.
And he got blocked by Trump on Twitter.
Seriously? Mm-hmm. I'm not surprised, but I mean, I'm surprised they haven't tried to remake Dead Zone and kind of pull that.
They should. That would be awesome.
I don't know if they should. But
I mean, I don't know because the other one was good, but
yeah.
And this is actually, we get to the point where he's kind of starting to get a little bit ignored. Like, Carrie was huge, The Shining was huge, Creepshow was his kind of acting coming out party for better or worse. But then we have, Christine, Children of the Corn, Firestarter, Cat's Eye, like Silver
Outlander.
Bullet.
I love Children of the Corn. Just the little shit kid. Outlander, we have your woman. Her blood is fresh.
Wasn't that like a 30-year-old woman with some kind of like just looked like a little kid? Or something?
No, that was a little kid.
The main one with the black hair was actually like a 30-year-old.
Was it? Really?
Yeah. And she had some kind of just like, she looks like a little kid. Yeah.
Malachi.
But, I don't know if it's because these aren't as big of Stephen King books.
Yeah.
But, it was, when they're not a movie based on a Stephen King novel, this is a big deal. But, nobody really remembers Christine, Firestarter, Cat's Eye, Silver Bullet. These are really
those are just like especially Silver Bullet. Firestarter a little bit. I mean, because of Drew Barrymore. But aside from that, I mean, they're not big ones.
Yeah, Firestarter was one of his first novels. I think it was his fifth novel after The Stand. But then the coked out maniac makes Maximum Overdrive.
Oh my God.
Because he decided that no director had gotten Stephen King right. So he steps up into the director's chair, and what a fucking disaster this is.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you let people with like infinite power do things that they weren't meant to do, like George Lucas. You know
I
what
was
I
going
mean?
to say that's a Lucas thing.
And,
right there.
and don't get me wrong, like I love Stephen King, the educator. You know, I love him as an entertainment entity as well. But like, buddy, sit down. Like, stay in your lane. Stay with what you're good at. You know, don't direct. Cry.
Yeah, I think that
You want to explain Maximum Overdrive for the uninitiated?
Please do, John.
Well, I think first off, it needs to be known that there were other directors on this project.
Okay.
Bud Light, Valium, and crack cocaine.
What was the year on what's the year on this?
1986.
1986.
Okay,
This is
yeah.
right before he got clean. Because his family had just dumped out like a bunch of empty beer cans and NyQuil and Sudafed and cocaine.
Yeah, I mean, we've been making the jokes, guys, but I mean, do we need to explicitly say, like, I mean, Stephen King was a drug addict and cocaine wrote a lot of his books.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, we joke about that, like, being facetious, but I mean, he was an addict. I mean, he was an alcoholic and he was addicted to coke and he had a lot of, like, issues.
Well, Cujo,
He
doesn't remember writing
Yeah,
that book.
he doesn't remember writing it.
Because he was just so drunk and coked out when he was writing it that basically his fingers just did all the work and his brain didn't remember. But yeah, Maximum Overdrive is there's like aliens affect the machines on Earth.
Yeah.
And like every machine except the ones that the characters need for the film are trying to kill all of us.
So basically, it's like Transformers before Transformers.
Yeah. And only Stephen King could write about a killer vending machine. Although he also wrote about killing chattering teeth, so...
I mean, why not? Why can't you add other emotions other than just killing?
Right?
Like,
Well,
why
that's
not-
easy.
Yeah, like, well, I mean, like, why don't you just write, the vending machine was trying to, make love to someone.
Yeah. Let's get it on.
Let's get it on.
Hey, bugles have a big hole right in the... Funyuns.
Yeah.
We're going to have some Funyuns.
Oh, God.
But yeah, it's just a delirious mess of a movie. Even if he wasn't, like, crazy behind the director's chair on drugs, like, because a lot of, like, stunt actors almost died while making this because he didn't know how to properly, like, do stunts and
Stunt people died on this.
No, they came close.
Almost
like
died.
2 or 3
Yeah?
people were severely injured, almost
Jesus
to the point
Christ.
of death, because just the coked out maniac writers behind the director's chair going faster, faster. And
Right, which, I mean, I don't know how he got to that point where he was allowed to do that. Because, I mean, don't you have a stunt coordinator?
Usually you do.
You would think.
You would think.
we probably saved a lot of money on cocaine by not having the stunt coordinator there. But this is, I think, where he very much reveals himself because, nobody's gotten your work right. If this is your work right, then are you a hack fraud? Because this is terrible. This is an absolutely
it
terrible
all
movie.
comes down to he's a fantastic writer, but he doesn't speak the language of film. That's just it,
Then a step in the right direction here from Rob Reiner is Stand By Me.
Yeah. I forget that's a Stephen King film.
Well, it's his Chris Gaines. I think it's a Bachman book. Like Garth Brooks to Chris Gaines. Like, it's one of his Richard Bachman pseudonym stories, which I think was called The Body, was the short. Then we get to Lawnmower Man, which
Oh my
is,
God.
in name only, he actually sued to have his name removed.
Really?
Because there's only 1% of that film that has to do with his short story. The short story is actually about a big fat man who mows the lawn by eating the grass on his hands and knees and eating possums. Like
Brian, that's what you need. You've been looking for someone to do your lawn.
I mean, I'm okay with also hiring, Jeff Fahey to do it too. I mean, I can do that. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I can't bring him into my basement and say, hey, put on this headset. I'm going to send you into virtual reality land. Like a certain former James Bond. But I love Lawnmower Man. That's a guilty pleasure of mine. We don't need to talk about Lawnmower Man 2, but
Electric Boogaloo.
No. And then actually, you're not that far off. It is Electric Boogaloo.
But it has absolutely nothing to do with his story.
God.
So this is the part where we're optioning his work, but we don't even use it as the source material.
Yeah, and what's funny, I'm looking at IMDb, it's like Stephen King title only.
Yeah. And then speaking of film adaptations that go completely against his original story, The Running Man.
That was
It has nothing to do
That's seriously
with
a Stephen King film.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Well, The Running Man it's a very elaborate story where it's not like it is a game show in a sense, but like you go across the country to get to your source, and there's surveillance cameras and trees and on buildings and stuff. And he's fighting to save his wife and everything. Like the core is that. The fight to the death for entertainment of people, like that is still there. It's still present, but it's very much different in the book. And the guy is obviously not a jacked up Austrian either.
No, no, but I love Running Man.
Yeah, I think this is a great wrap up of, or a little primer of some of his earlier works that have been adapted. But now that we're a little further in the list, maybe we should talk about some of our favorites.
Sure.
Because that's a little bit more, personal for us. So,
gotcha. Who wants to lead off here?
I think you should, John, because you are the King expert, I feel.
Yes.
But first, I know we're a movie podcast, but talk about maybe your favorite book first. And it doesn't have to have been adapted. It doesn't have to be one of your favorite adaptations. If you want, I'll start the book discussion.
My favorite book is probably The Dead Zone. It's his cleanest work that has an actual ending. Because I just remember I was into reading The Shining, and then by the end of it, I was just like, oh.
Yeah, I felt that.
Well.
You guys are going to be mad at me, but I feel the same way about Salem's Lot. I tried to read it, and I was like, meh.
All right, guys.
I got you beat. I got both you beat, and you're gonna hate me. I've never read a Stephen King book.
Ever.
Never.
That's surprising. Well, my favorite
I'm
Stephen
a Clive
King.
Barker fan. That's me.
Okay.
But
all right.
I mean, Stephen King is already
You don't have
acknowledged
to have one or the other.
No, dude.
It's not Coke and Pepsi.
No, I understand that, but I'm just like when I'm looking at horror literature, I default to Barker. Like that's what I want to read, and it's not that I have anything against Stephen King. It's just I like Barker.
Yeah.
He's my guy.
Well, my favorite Stephen King book is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, which is unusual. It was printed in '99.
Yeah.
And when I read it, it was a new book. So I read it when I was like 14. And it's about this girl who gets lost in the woods. She gets separated from her mother and brother. And I don't know. They're on a family hiking trip. I don't know if it's in Maine, probably, because it's a Stephen King book.
Probably.
And it's funny because this is actually the last book that was published right before Stephen's car accident.
Oh, yeah.
And we can talk about that in a second. But
he wasn't in a car when he got hit by a car. Wasn't it a walking accident at that point?
I mean, I guess he was destroyed by a minivan.
Yeah.
The person that was driving it was in a car accident.
It's true. But my favorite book is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, about this girl who gets lost in the woods, and she has only a few things on her. She has her Game Boy, some food, and a bottle of Surge, which I think is funny. But she has a Walkman.
Okay.
And, I really identified with that because I think the book, like you were saying, The Shining is about isolation. I think this book is very much about like loneliness, not like the miserable kind, but just like knowing that you're on your own and like you can handle it. I'm an only child and I really related to that. And even though she has a brother in this, like she's in the woods by herself. And it's funny because this never was adapted but it was supposed to be by George Romero.
Oh.
And I would have loved to see that goddamn movie. I am so mad.
We haven't mentioned that, like, George Romero and Stephen King are like peas and carrots.
They're best buddies. They were best
Really?
buddies.
Yeah, George Romero actually has a glass case under lock and key in his house of every Stephen King novel ever written, like it's a piece of art in a museum.
Well, he did.
He did.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Past tense. But
We have to always remember that now.
I would still love to see an adaptation of this book, though, and I think Daphne Keane should play the little girl from Logan.
Oh, yeah.
She was the X-23.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite book. I also have to like make a strong case for Stephen King's book on writing, and it was one of the first things he wrote after his accident.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to, but one of the things that is really interesting about Stephen King is that he didn't have any desire to write, but this like voice in his head was just hammering away and saying like, you have to, because he was so messed up from the car accident. We can talk about that really quick because I think it's a huge part of his life. He was hit by a van, and his like, he remembers seeing like his leg out at the wrong angle, sticking out of his jeans, and his lap was moved, so his hips were like twisted from being hit by the car, because he, like John said, he was walking and the van just sort of wiped him the hell out. And then
probably like, this would make a great story, get my typewriter.
And then later,
hospital.
And then later on, his lung collapsed before he made it to the hospital. And it was funny because at first, like, I guess the guy thought he had hit a deer, but Steven's glasses flew off and landed in the guy's car, and that's how they realized, oh my God, like I hit a person. So I think the most fucked up thing about this story is, so the year's like 99. It's the summer of 1999, right after Tom Gordon came out. And he and his lawyers had to buy the van that hit him. They purchased it for like $1,200 so that no one would sell it on fucking eBay.
That's ridiculous.
They had to buy it because they didn't want anyone to buy it on eBay.
Did they ever press charges against the guy who hit him?
It didn't say. Any of the readings that I didn't say. It was an accident, through and through. But
this guy like changing his radio station or something, or
I don't know.
Oh no, I think that he had a dog in the back of the car, and he was like, kind of like, no, get back in the back seat, Rover. And then what was that?
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
But I find that Stephen King's best work and his worst stuff is his short stories.
Yeah, I buy
and
that.
a lot of people's favorite film adaptations, Stand By Me, Shawshank Redemption.
Are you going to start talking about your favorites? Get it.
Well, you asked me about his writing.
Yeah, I know.
Are based on his short stories. And I mean, some of his short stories are fucking stupid. And he's
Tell me how you really feel, John.
like, what is wrong with you?
Stephen King, if he was listening to this episode, he'd be like, yeah. And then we get to that part and be like,
Stop calling me a fat, coked-out sex pervert.
yeah, right. Like he gives a shit what we think.
Yeah.
Anyways, that'd be awesome if we were powerful enough that he cared.
Someday.
So I picked my top 6 because I like to go.
I actually picked
I'm going
6
one
too.
further here.
Did you?
I picked 6
I have
as well.
5. That's what the assignment was. You fuckers. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
So number 6, Carrie. You gotta throw some respect to the OG.
The OG.
The OG.
Stop it.
Stand By Me is a classic, And the things, when you really get good directors in to do Stephen King, it really helps. Kubrick and then Reiner. Reiner did Stand By Me. It's a fairly faithful adaptation and a very good one. I think a lot of the Stephen Kingisms are really kind of neutered. They're pushed down.
Yeah.
So they're not too aggressive. But you do have the dead kid and the parents that are just miles away, and the friends that are dangerous, and the bullies that want to kill you. I don't want to know Stephen King growing up.
I was going to say, because
bullies, everyone
the bullies are just awful.
Vicious.
Yeah. Stand By Me, It, sometimes
they come back. Sometimes they come back. They're horrible. Not only are they undead, but they just want to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess bullying is just something that either you experience or you don't. And since you didn't, John, maybe it's just outside of your realm.
I mean,
but
these are dangerously aggressive.
Well, I would say that I was only mildly bullied growing up, and I mean, one of the results was a concussion, and I wouldn't even call it that much bullying, and still it was a concussion. So bullies suck.
I was bullied a lot, but I mean, I never had that level of violence from bullies.
Yeah, I mean,
but I mean, I guess my guess is Stephen King was probably bullied a lot as well.
Yeah,
because that would influence its writing.
Of course,
Yeah,
it's where the darkness comes from. I bet.
Yeah. This one's a little bit weird because we had just talked about this a couple minutes ago. It's more of a Stanley Kubrick movie than it is a Stephen King adaptation, and that's The Shining.
Yes.
The Shinin.
Shinin.
Which I think I wrote Shinin actually here. Oops.
You want to get sued?
Little
Treehouse of Horror for you guys from The Simpsons.
I think it's one of the most brilliantly made horror movies. And we've talked about this on the show before, but it's kind of going completely against the tropes of a horror movie. Like, there's supposed to be a musical shock sound here so you know how to feel. And Stanley Kubrick just does not do that.
Yeah.
You know, it's unsettling in how it defies all of your horror expectations. And I think that's what makes this film so successful.
He
Works against conventions.
relies strictly on the visuals to convey the horror. You know, and it's not like, it isn't like, you know, horror we have nowadays where they show you everything. He doesn't show you everything. And he does it in a way where it's, you know, just kind of under the skin. And you just kind of get like the shots where it's just like Jack Torrance in that massive hotel and you're trying to get the idea that it's isolation and it's only him, you know, massive shots like that, you know, jump cuts to the elevator full of blood. You know, it's not a gory film by any stretch. It's actually pretty mild on that, but you watch it and you're just like, yeah, it's pretty gory.
No.
But he doesn't explicitly show you all that.
Yeah.
And, you know, we can follow the story just enough to be invested, but we also are lost, and that is brilliant in just how unsettling that is, because you know just enough to be able to follow, but you don't really know what's happening. You know, half the time, because Jack Torrance doesn't know what's happening. And I kind of disagree with Stephen King. I kind of like that it kind of goes against type by putting Jack Nicholson in there, because he seems unsettling from the beginning. It's not the obvious, boy, we're such a happy family, and everything's going to turn out wonderfully. It's like, oh no, shit's going to get bad. Like, you kind of get a sense right off the bat that, you know, Jack Torrance is
it also
nuts.
it also just kind of makes more sense to me. You know, you've got a character like Jack Torrance in The Shining, who he clearly has you know, previous exposure to that darkness. You know, he's been exposed to the darkness before. They make reference to the fact that he did grab the kid, or he hurt you know, Danny at one point, and like he's trying to get past that. And he views
momentary loss.
Yeah, but he's trying to get past that by, you know, this new venture of, oh, we're gonna be the happy family that goes and takes care of this massive hotel. But clearly he gets pulled back into that darkness to even more so. So I mean, I love that, because for me, I think it's more realistic than just the, oh, he's normal and he goes crazy.
Right.
You know?
Right. Fair enough.
Number 3 here is The Green Mile. Kind of forgotten one of the late 90s. Based on a bunch of short stories that were just published at different times. You know, and then they, you know, if you put them all together in one giant book, then you get your film adaptation of it. A little sappy, I'm not going to lie. But, you know, once again, Frank Darabont in the director's chair, Tom Hanks in the lead role. They had a lot of money and time to put behind this.
It's a good team.
It is a good team.
So in the wrong hands, this film could have been a little too schmaltzy and just, you know, but they were given the time to really flesh this story out. I think the film is nearly 3 hours.
It's a pretty long movie. Like in 1999, it wasn't commonplace to have movies that long.
No, I remember that being a lot of what the reviews at the time discussed, you know, how long it was and if movies should be that long. And that was a big deal.
Number 2 here, Misery.
Oh, yeah.
Brilliant horror adaptation. Once again, Rob Reiner behind the director's chair. A lot of people,
Annie Wilkes.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but this film is actually about cocaine.
It's about his relationship with cocaine.
Seriously?
Yeah, Annie Wilkes is cocaine, and he's the writer, and he can't move and he can't escape from cocaine.
Wow.
This is my favorite Kathy Bates endeavor. She is amazing in this.
Yeah. She won the Oscar, and she earned it.
She earned it. I mean, she is absolutely
She's
incredible.
Terrifying in it.
What's that phrase? Tour de force, like where they're just so powerful, and it's so. I mean, she swings that hammer, man, and oh my god, all the hairs of my neck
it's
go
not
on
even
end.
just the swinging the hammer; it's the lead up to it.
Oh, of course, no.
Like,
I mean, every facet of it is amazing.
My God.
It's amazing, but yeah, and it's also like the production of one of my favorite memes.
Which is
it's it's in the lead, like James Caan is in James Caan's in the bed, and like it's a scene from him when he's okay in the movie, James Caan, and then right after he gets like fucked up, and it's James Caan. I'm sorry, I think that meme is so funny, it kills me every time. Sorry.
But yeah, once again, Stephen King playing on isolation, you know,
and loneliness
and distance,
too, and
and of course, his favorite character, the troubled, brilliant writer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
A little bit of narcissism in his writing.
I mean, wouldn't you though?
And then I think, hands down, the best Stephen King film adaptation, Shawshank Redemption, based
Nice.
on Rita
Yeah.
Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption short
Yeah.
story.
Nice.
And he,
Nice.
I mean, it's considered one of the greatest films of all time. I don't think I have to go into too much detail. If you haven't seen it, you've been living under a rock, and if you have seen it, you like it. So
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's very important if you do like the idea of studying film even casually. I think it's an important one to see.
Absolutely.
Because of a lot of the, production that was done and, just like really on how to tell a good story, So that's a good list. There's some crossover on mine. Carrie's also on my list. That was like the first time I saw like, a scary movie that, I don't know, it wasn't like jump scares. It wasn't like the creepy slasher.
Yep.
It was a real horror movie. I also love the 70s sensibilities about it,
Tube socks and
Well,
shorts.
the dresses at prom. Hello. It's funny because, you watch it like in a more modern era and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, the production design. But it's like, oh no, it was just like modern then.
You're like,
but I think
no, that's the 70s.
I think it's very cool, And I think it brings up a lot of good questions, and the morality there is really clear because normally I don't like to see girl on girl aggression because I think it's tired and dumb to have girls compete with each other like that and bully each other. But it's clear that they're wrong and the film tells us it is. So I think it's an okay element.
Oh, guys, we forgot to mention a friend of the show, PJ Souls, is in that movie.
Really?
Yeah,
What?
she is.
Yeah.
She is in it.
She's one of
Really?
the bully girls in there.
Oh,
She's one of the bully
excellent.
girls.
Excellent. Amy Irving is in that
This
too.
is before Rock and Roll High School, and then her career just took the nosedive, and she ended up in Uncle Sam.
Oh, God.
Yeah, you
50
Thanks.
years later.
You had to bring
sticking
that
it
up,
to her
didn't you?
again. Excellent. Thanks, babe.
Friend of the
Never
show,
gonna
PJ
get her on the
Souls.
show now. Thank
So
you.
glad you interrupted me for that. Misery made my list too, obviously, because it's frickin' brilliant. Creep Show made my list. I love Creep Show. I think it's so fun. I think it's just like awesome.
It's the chocolate and peanut butter come together.
Yes,
You've got-
I totally agree.
It's the chocolate peanut butter.
I totally
That's exactly
agree.
what it is.
And and like John, I also think Stand By Me is a great film.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually Stephen King's own. I don't know if favorite's the word, but it's the closest
Yeah.
to his work. The adaptation that's closest to the original, in his opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll go with a Darabont one, but a different one, The Mist.
Oh.
Loved that movie.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you watch it now and you're like, holy shit, that's half of the season 1 cast of The Walking Dead. But it's really funny, to see that. And I saw that after we were together, John,
Yeah, we saw it together.
in 2007.
Yeah.
We've been together a long ass time, dude.
Yeah.
We saw that movie a
crazy.
decade ago. But I've always liked it. So
Yeah. So my list, I have 6. Because-
overachievers, both of
Well,
you.
okay, I added this one because I forgot that it was a Stephen King movie. But I'm like, it has to be put on there. So my number 6 is Pet Cemetery.
Oh, dude.
Pet
Listen.
Movie is hilarious.
Listen.
I love that
There's
movie,
nothing
though.
I like more than like getting into the vodka and watching that one and doing like a solid drinking game.
Yeah. Yeah.
trouble on that.
The Indians, they,
Cross on strong now. And,
they're up there on that hill there.
Guys
Indians,
doing your
they know.
Fred Gwynn.
The Indians, they
Nailing
know.
it.
Oh, let him go on the road, Les.
Sometimes.
Nailing it.
Sometimes dead is better.
Oh
But
my
yeah,
God, you're
Pet Cemetery. I remember seeing that when I was a kid, and like I still can't watch the scene where the kid gets run over by the truck. I still can't
It's
because
hysterically
no,
funny.
it's hysterically funny and it's horrifying.
It's horrifying.
because all that's left are his feet,
Yeah?
his chopped off feet. That's it.
Yeah, well, he's
Elaine,
pink mist the rest of
I
the
want
way.
to get your opinion on this here. Female director, and I've noticed that sometimes female directed movies are some of those fucked up shit I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
You know what we could just call them, though, hun?
What?
A director.
Well, no, I do think that it's so rare in Hollywood for women to get an opportunity to direct that it is something that you take note of.
Okay,
you see
so
it.
what's your question then?
why is it that women actually can be more like twice as deranged as men when men are usually like the aggressive
I don't mean to be like Rainbow Coalition with you, but like it's because people are people and everyone's different.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't matter if she's a woman. Like some women aren't all that maternal or sentimental. You know, I mean, look at me. Like for Valentine's Day and anniversaries, I don't really give a shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and some guys love that. You know, everyone's different. You know.
Okay.
But I mean, Pet Sematary, it's got a great mix, in my opinion, of pure horror. Okay,
And that little shit from Boy Meets World's the little kid.
No, he's not.
He was on Boy Meets World. He wasn't the main character, but he was in Boy Meets World.
But you've got the most Gage.
Yes, Gage.
Fucking Gage. But I mean, you've got just pure horror with the setup, and then it literally goes down to like, you know, how do you deal with that type of tragedy?
Oh yeah.
You know, like
Well, that probably means more to you now, Brian, because you have kids now. I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, I love that movie because, and also the effects. It's got fantastic practical effects in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
There's sometimes
And the
like,
sister
Gage
who's
or the
really
church
disturbing.
puppet is not so good though.
The church puppet?
Not
Yeah,
so
the
good.
cat.
Oh, yeah, we're gonna talk about that one.
Not so good.
Yeah. So, number 5 is The Shining, of course. We've already kind of talked about that.
The Shining didn't make my list because it's misogynistic.
Okay, well, number 4, I got Carrie, because that's just hilarious. I'm sorry, I laugh at Carrie.
Well, it's got Travolta in it. How
It's
can
got
you not laugh?
Travolta. Well, no, it's got.
Oh shit! It
Yeah,
totally.
it does.
Oh, I forgot about.
It's got Travolta in it,
amazing.
and I just find it funny.
That's
I have Creep Show for number 3. Again, chocolate and peanut butter come together in one movie.
Nice.
And number 2, this one gets laughed at a lot, but it's worth noting that this is the only film that Stephen King wrote specifically for the screen, and it's Sleepwalkers.
Oh, I don't think I've seen that.
Sleepwalkers? Okay, this movie is hilarious. Okay, and I don't know where the hell this came from, but yeah, Stephen King wrote this in 1992, and he wrote it specifically for the movie. It's not an adaptation;
way.
it's nothing like that. Mick Garris directed it. But what's nice about this is it's basically about these cat people called the Sleepwalkers. I'm not joking. I'm serious.
Oh no, this sounds like something Stephen King would write.
They're cat people. Oh, it gets better. Okay, so
When was he off the cocaine?
he might be just coming off of it at this point.
87.
But okay, so this is him sober. But he came up with this story of these two cat people, a mother and son, who have a weird, bizarre, incestuous relationship.
Of course they do.
Imagine that.
Okay. So Brian Krause plays Charles Brady, who's the cat person, and Alice Craig.
Brian, do you have any idea what this description sounds? And you're so dead
You
serious
have to see
about
it. You have to see it, though. It's one of these movies you absolutely
it
have to
doesn't
see.
even sound a
I'm
little
watching
good.
this now.
Okay.
Yeah, this is
so
happening.
These giant anthropomorphic cat people, basically, you know, they're like the you're laughing so hard. But
these incestual cat people.
yes,
Come to Maine.
they do. And what they end up doing is they're trying to find young women to feed off of. They feed off of like their life force. They're like vampires,
Okay.
but they're cat people. Okay, and their enemies are literal cats. So, like, what's funny is the whole movie, you find that they're in this house, the cat people, and they have traps all over the house to kill the cats, because the cats are like their sworn enemies.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense. You're like, so they're cat people, but the cats can hurt them? And it's a horrible movie. Like, it's not a good film, but I love it. I really
The studio's
do.
like, oh boy, guys, Stephen King's writing a script just for us. And then you get it, and you're like, what the fuck is this?
Dude, it sounds like a nightmare you'd have after like eating anchovy pizza right before bed.
But it's hilarious, and it has Madchen Amek from Twin Peaks in it. So this is like coming right off of Twin Peaks, and this is like her first feature film role.
Nice.
But what's interesting to note, this is the only film that has John Landis, Joe Dante, Stephen King, Clive Barker, and Toby Hooper in the same movie.
Are they actors?
They're acting in the film.
That's incredible, actually.
Yeah, it's the
Wow.
only one that has all of those actors, all of those directors in the film.
Well, I know what
and
John's doing tonight.
And
right.
of course, Stephen King shows up in it too. But
As you do.
it's
Yeah,
just
That's funny.
It's so awesomely bad. Like, you watch it and you're just like, how did someone greenlight this?
Dude.
But yeah, incestuous cat people.
Should we do it as a pantheon sometime?
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
I got a copy of it. Yeah.
That's the whole episode. John will just do an episode of cat noise.
Oh, God.
That's the worst.
And of course, number one for me is Salem's Lot.
Nice.
I love.
Okay.
I the first time I got that DVD, I plowed through the entire film.
Wow. I tried reading the book and I was like, no.
Like the actual length of that movie is like 4 hours long.
What? Really?
Yeah, no, it's a miniseries.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
I remember I'm like, oh, I'll just watch this Salem's Lot. Everyone says it's good, and you're just like, holy crap, it's 4 hours long.
Yeah.
But you can't stop watching it because it's so good.
Interesting.
But yeah, don't see the Rob Lowe version. It is terrible.
What has Rob Lowe in it? That's your first.
That was your first indicator.
The only thing good Rob Lowe's ever been in is Wayne's World.
Yeah. No, but I just
As
love
the villain.
The part about Salem's Lot I love is just like it's clearly a vampire film, but they don't do it in a cheesy kind of Dracula way.
Interesting.
You know, they kind of look at it as more of an infestation because it starts picking off one person after another.
Yeah.
You know, and I just love that. And of course, you know, the makeup effects are great. I think that was a Tobe Hooper film.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
It was.
yeah.
Sorry for the dead silence there, folks. I was pausing.
You're pausing to go back into your movie
The
knowledge.
the chippy wheel was running.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a man who's just so built on like hit and miss, but yet he's remembered as this brilliant auteur who's never done anything wrong. But like half of his stories are shit, half of his short stories are shit, half of his film adaptations are shit. Like, but when he hits gold,
He hits gold.
He hits it. You know, good.
I will say that I think the best thing he has done is his book on writing. It is so thorough.
Mm-hmm.
It is so educational. And I think it's goddamn inspiring, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, like, the way that he talks to the reader and says, you know, things about how to write. It is by far a very unconventional favorite book. In fact, John made fun of me because he said, of course, the one on writing is your favorite. You know, but honestly, I mean, it's such a different tack from what we're used to him. I mean, you know, there's a brilliant mind in there by reading the book that he has put together on writing. Right. You know?
And I'm sure, dear audience, my lovelies, you've noticed that there's been a glaring omission from today's episode. And I can't think of what it is.
Oh, see what he did there.
We have a live episode coming up on Thursday here.
Yep.
Which would be
The 21st.
The 21st.
Yes.
We'll be at Zeke's Coffee, Pittsburgh, doing our very first live podcast recording.
Zeke's in East Liberty.
So they're going to be kicking off their fall menu of drinks and goodies. So
Guys, I'm like legit excited for the drinks.
And we'll be talking about the living impaired.
It's
known as zombies.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're in Pittsburgh. We haven't done a zombie episode. I mean, we did a Romero episode, but we haven't done a full-blown zombie episode.
And
so
guys,
we got to do it.
It's gonna be magic. We have 2 hours
We'll have
just to talk
stickers.
about zombies.
We
have
have
stickers.
We have some stickers to pass
gotta
out.
have at least one of those.
And then
Yeah.
Zeke's will be releasing their fall brew.
Yep.
Night of the Living Brew. And all their like yummy fall drinks.
Yeah.
I've heard rumors of a maple spice latte, and I'm so into it.
So 7 p.m. on the 21st at Zeke's Pittsburgh. Come on down.
Be there, be square.
You know, obviously, and then the following week we will be discussing the book, the miniseries, and now the new movie of It.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna
So
be a fun episode.
we've given you three to 4 weeks to have seen it.
Yeah.
Obviously, as we do, we're going to spoil the shit out of it.
Yeah.
But
We can't not spoil the shit out of it. I mean, come on.
So in 2 weeks we will have our It review here. So be on the lookout for that. But make sure if you are in Pittsburgh or in the nearby area, do stop by Zeke's and check out our live show on Thursday the 21st
At 7.
But yeah, we will.
That's going to be a 2-hour long show, too. Like, that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking about zombies for 2 hours long.
I have no doubt that we can talk for 2 hours.
I don't have.
I'm not worried.
I may be coughing during that time, too. So you can do your drinking game of drink every single time Brian coughs, you know, in front of us. That's cool, too.
Yeah. But yeah, so that is why we didn't mention It, which is probably one of his Mount Rushmores, for better or worse.
Yeah.
It probably was odd that we didn't mention that. We probably should have said that earlier that we are going to do an It show. Sorry, guys, it's early.
But yeah, so Stephen King in a nutshell, which is probably a book that he's writing. It's gonna be the next Dark Tower. Stephen King in a nutshell, Dark Tower, Chapter 9. He's a fascinating pop culture icon, and I think it's because he is so commercial, for better or worse. And I mean, a lot of people say that, he's one of the greatest, writers or prolific figures of a generation, and then there are others that say, he's just kind of a hackneyed schmuck writer who just does cornball horror, cheese sandwiches.
I don't know. I've seen some cornball horror cheese sandwich, and King's not in that bracket.
I think he's somewhere in between. Like
he's not a Lloyd Kaufman. Okay,
I think that he's hey, take it easy on Lloyd. But he's somewhere in between. Like some of the things that he's written, will stand the test of time, and then other things are killer cars and killer vending machines and killing chatting teeth. And like, you got to take the good with the bad with Stephen King, and you have to. It's hard because a lot of people haven't read. He's 54 novels, like 200 short stories. A lot of people haven't read the breadth of his work to really make. I'm far from it. I've probably read a quarter of his books, maybe.
I have tried to read far more of his books than I've actually finished.
I read zero. I've seen the movies though.
I read like 700 pages of The Stand and just didn't finish it. So, Lane, how do you feel about Stephen here, and how do you, more importantly, how do you feel about some of the film adaptations of his works?
I think like I said before, I see him as sort of a full entity, as a person. Obviously he and I agree on politics quite closely, so I'm a fan of him in that regard, of basic opinions of humanity, which seem to be rare in the world right now. So I mean, I do respect him as a person. I also I like the fact that he can look at past works, of his own adaptations, and he isn't just a Hollywood puppet. Obviously he wasn't afraid to shit all over The Shining. I do like that a lot. I think that it's interesting, to really get into this conversation and to find some critique of his work. I think that that's really important because I think the name is bigger than the man himself at this point. Because, you think Stephen King and most people think of like horror and like the gold standard. And I think we have to continually have these conversations and say, look, he doesn't always strike gold. But, he clearly understands his craft. And one of the things that really strikes me about him is that he has to write. And he's like the opposite of writer's block. Like he writes every day. He doesn't have a choice. And I think that is so fascinating to just churn out all this work,
He writes 2,000 words a day, no matter what, even if he just feels he has nothing left to give.
Which is insane. Insane. Do you know how many words that is? That's so many.
2,000 words.
Especially when you don't want to write, or don't feel like you can. So yeah, I mean, and as far as his adaptations go, I mean, I think that a lot of times his novels, like you said, John, like I think a lot of his novels can be meandering. And I think when they're successfully adapted, it's because they've been brought into a clean narrative.
Yeah. And sorry, Brian, to to cut you off here on your now, but it's hard, I think, to judge the film adaptations by Stephen King, because something like The Running Man, I'm very aware. I didn't actually read the story, but I'm very aware of the structure of it and what it's about, and it's very, very, very different from the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. So, can we properly judge Stephen King by film adaptations, especially when some of them,
rarely.
The Body, aka Stand By Me, very, very close and honorable to the story. Running Man, not so much. So it's kind of a tough argument to make, because can we properly judge Stephen King by film adaptations of his work?
Probably
not
not.
necessarily.
And you know what? I'm also that's one of the things that's on my list of stuff to do is start reading Stephen King, at least some of the novels that I've already seen the adaptations for. I've done that with Clive Barker because I'm a big fan of his. And you read Hellbound Heart, and then you watch Hellraiser, and you can clearly see that there are differences, even though that one is made by the same author. But I look at Stephen King as a man who is able to understand horror that isn't necessarily always supernatural. His stories are all rooted in human horror. He's not like a body horror person like a David Cronenberg or anything like that. He's looking at real human emotions like isolation. And that seems to be like the primary one that I see in his, at least the adaptations are always about isolation. Carrie is isolated from the social structure of high school. Jack Torrance is isolated not only physically, but he's also isolated from his family. You also have Christine, where, the main character in that film is again isolated in a social setting. Misery goes without saying. It always seems to come down to isolation for him. And I can appreciate that because in those moments where you're isolated from everything, that is when the mind starts to wander. That is when you start to go to those dark places. And King has a knack for being able to do that.
I agree.
So,
But he's also a weird, drugged out sex weirdo.
There is that too.
Yeah, some of the books with the sexual content, that's the part that makes me uncomfortable about Stephen King, just because I don't think a lot of that stuff is necessary. I think, it's tropes that are overused and can be really damaging.
Yeah.
I find it very odd that he thinks that The Shining is misogynistic when, and we'll talk about this in 2 weeks, when he writes a story about a little girl who decides the only way to get out of a sewer is to have 6 men gangbang her.
I don't disagree. Disagree with this assessment.
You know, but
some of it.
So you leave that little tidbit right at the end, didn't you? Okay.
We'll go into that in a little more detail.
But that makes everybody want more.
It's true.
We'll be talking about it, so stay tuned.
So, Lane, where can they find you on
Bev?
Where can they find you on the Twitters?
You can find me at LA_Croft.
John.
You can find me at the Unreal J Wolves.
You can find me at Brian Content. I also run the Psycho Show Twitter. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+, at Psycho Show. You can also find us on the Epicast Network at epicastnetwork.com. If you have a favorite movie or question you want to throw away, you want to talk to us a little bit about Stephen King, you can contact us at cinemapsychoshow.com. Make sure to subscribe to us on iTunes. Send us a rate, send us a review. We love getting those. And also make sure to check us out on Thursday at Zeke's Coffee, Pittsburgh.
September 21st.
September 21st.
What time, Brian?
That'll be 7 p.m.
7 p.m.
We'll be there, talk about zombies for you guys. And we'll be drinking lots of Zeke's Coffee. So check us out, September 21st, Zeke's Coffee, Pittsburgh, 7 p.m. And we'll see you then.
Float. They all float.